What if we take the concepts of the four horsemen of apocalypse and the seven seals from the Book of Revelation, combine them with the art direction of Warcraft and Warhammer 40k, with the gameplay taking inspiration from The Legend of Zelda, God of War, and Devil May Cry, and blending them all together in the nice and thick moody texture of 7th gen console era? Well, what you get is peak 7th gen gaming. Darksiders, एक मल्टीमीडिया franchise established and developed by Visual Games, Gunfire Games and Airship Syndicate, with the creative direction of comic book artist Joe Mad, known for his work on Deadpool, Uncanny X-Men and Battle Chasers. Darksiders एक हाई फैंटेसी पोस्ट अपोकलिप्टिक सीरीज है जिसमें प्लेयर्स ईच हॉर्समैन को कंट्रोल करते हैं इन देयर रिस्पेक्टिव गेम्स, टेकिंग ऑन द लीजियंस ऑफ हेवन एंड हेल. The four horsemen are the harbinger of apocalypse between the three kingdoms of earth, heaven and hell, जो अपने बिब्लिकल काउंटरपार्ट की तरह ऑल सेवन सील्स के ब्रेक होने का वेट कर रहे हैं टू राइड ऑन देयर हॉर्सेस एंड क्लेंस द किंगडम ऑफ ह्यूमंस, एंजल्स एंड डीमंस. But in the Darksiders universe, they also uphold balance between the three kingdoms, on the order of Charred Council, who are the higher entity of this universe. In the prologue of Darksiders, the youngest horseman, War, gets a false alarm about the start of End War, जिसमें War present day Earth पर पहुंचता है to complete his task to bring apocalypse. But उसे पता चलता है कि he has been tricked and the seventh seal is still intact. Because of this complication, Archangel Abaddon gets slaughtered by demons, and Charred Council War को Hell Legion के साथ conspire करने के accusations के लिए imprison कर लेती है. A century has passed since War's imprisonment, and Charred Council War को अपनी innocence prove करने का एक मौका देती है, in which War returns to the now desolate hellscape that is Earth, still suffering from the ongoing battle between the forces of heaven and hell, जहाँ War को एक humongous demon को मारना होगा, known as the Destroyer, to take his revenge and figure out what exactly happened a century ago, and this is the premise of Darksiders. A mostly straightforward revenge story suiting its no-nonsense main character that becomes much larger by the end of the game, fleshing out this universe and setting up plot threads जो future game explore करते हैं through other horsemen. Visually and thematically, Darksiders might not be the most original thing ever created, but the way the game presents its concept and universe is excellent, with great character design, great cinematics, and top-notch voice acting, with talents such as Liam O'Brien, Troy Baker, and Mark Hamill.
Remember that, or I will really get under your skin.
Visual Games and Joe Mad created a vast universe जिसे Darksiders 1 mostly under the wraps रखता है, leaving it on the future games to expand upon the lore. Also, playing as the four horsemen of apocalypse is one of the most metal thing I've seen a video game series ever do, and executing it with such a gravitas on their first try, commendable, definitely commendable. Gameplay wise, Darksiders since day one एक trend chaser series रही है instead of trend settler, which is not a bad thing considering how well Darksiders uses its inspirations. The series is not shy about it. Instead, it wears its inspiration on its sleeves with pride and boldness. Darksiders 1 का गेम स्ट्रक्चर heavily inspired है The Legend of Zelda से, जहाँ प्लेयर्स मल्टीपल डंजन्स विजिट करते हैं with each of them having their own unique gimmick, जिन्हें सॉल्व करने के लिए प्लेयर्स को डिफरेंट यूटिलिटी इक्विपमेंट्स का यूज़ करना होता है, लाइक अ ग्रैपलिंग हुक, अ क्रॉस ब्लेड और पोर्टल्स, जो सीरीज स्टेपल है एंड अपीयर्स इन एवरी गेम एक्सेप्ट Darksiders 3. सो द डंजन एक्सप्लोरेशन सीरीज का एक इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट है, एंड Darksiders 1 इस डिज़ाइन के पजल एंड प्लेटफॉर्मिंग एस्पेक्ट पर हैवी एम्फेसिस करता है, विद मोस्टली गुड ब्रेन टीजर्स एंड स्मूथ प्लेटफॉर्मिंग. Combat design is a mix between older God of War games and Devil May Cry, but overall ये God of War की तरफ ज़्यादा lean करता है, with it taking small elements from Devil May Cry like dash attacks, aerial combat, and target lock-on behavior. War is a hulking beast paired with his two-handed sword Chaos Eater, which is as big as himself and fuels his rage and power with each enemy killed, जो game में actual mechanic है in which weapons upgrade as much as you use them, providing passive buffs like better damage. Game में total 3 main weapons हैं. Chaos Eater, जो high damage dealing sword है, ideal for 1v1 ground and aerial combat. The Harvester, Death Scythe, which is good for crowd controlling with its wide ranged and fast attacks. And Tamo Gauntlets, used for slow but staggering attacks. Each weapon has multiple combos and players mid-combat इन्हें use कर सकते हैं without switching, since primary and secondary weapons different buttons पर mapped हैं, and both secondary weapons can be switched with the press of a button. So there is a good amount of room for skill expression, which can be expanded further with the use of utility equipment in combat. This is what gives the game its DMC feel, because you don't need to break the momentum of the combat to switch weapons, and you can continue styling on enemies as much as you want. Though speaking of DMC, I really wish Darksiders के secondary weapon were better balanced, because they have some really cool combos and animations, but in the end, Chaos Eater has an edge over them, because with all the upgrades, it can easily be an all-rounder weapon, जो better damage dealer है. So if the player want, वो easily game को complete कर सकते हैं without ever touching secondary weapons other than for solving puzzles. कॉमेट में सम स्मॉल रफ एजेस हैं लाइक अनइवन हिटबॉक्सेस जो काफ़ी अनोइंग हो सकते हैं, एंड इन द केस ऑफ स्ट्रागा बॉस फाइट इट मेड मी रीस्टार्ट द गेम ऑन लोअर डिफिकल्टी. बट अदर देन माइनर कॉम्बैट इशूज देयर इज वन थिंग जो डार्कसाइडर्स की एक बेस गेम डिज़ाइन फ्लॉ है, विच इज़ बैक ट्रैकिंग. ऑल द मेनलैंड डार्कसाइडर्स गेम्स ओपन हब वर्ल्ड डिज़ाइन का यूज़ करते हैं टू कनेक्ट देयर लेवल्स, एंड ईच गेम हैज़ मोमेंट्स जहाँ प्लेयर्स को इन हब्स में मल्टीपल टाइम बैक ट्रैक करना होता है टू प्रोग्रेस द स्टोरी. ये मोमेंट मोस्टली गेम की लेंथ को आर्टिफिशियली स्ट्रेच करने के लिए प्रेजेंट हैं, एंड डार्कसाइडर 1 हैज़ द मोस्ट एग्रीजियस एग्जाम्पल ऑफ इट, जिसमें प्लेयर को गेम के फाइनल एक्ट में एक फैच क्वेस्ट करनी होती है इन विच दे नीड टू कलेक्ट 7 shards ऑफ आर्मेगेडन ब्लेड. ईच शार्ड गेम के एक डिफरेंट हब में लोकेटेड है, एंड कलेक्टिंग दैम हैज़ टू बी वन ऑफ द मोस्ट पेनफुली बोरिंग सेक्शंस आई हैव प्लेड इन सच अ सॉलिड गेम. एटलीस्ट गेम में एक फास्ट ट्रैवल सिस्टम है विच मेक्स इट लेस टीडियस, बट इवन दैन प्लेयर्स को इन बैरन लोकेशंस को फिर से एक्सप्लोर करना होगा विद नथिंग इंटरेस्टिंग हैपनिंग इन बिटवीन. I feel like this was a completely unnecessary section in the game because it ruins the entire momentum and pacing of the story. And what makes it worse, that this is just right before the final boss. While I can understand the developers wanted to stretch the length of the game, but Darksiders already a solid 8 to 10 hour game hai, and adding this section just ruins the replay value of the game. Other than that one major flaw, Darksiders मुझे एक काफ़ी solid Zelda clone लगा with a mature tone similar to God of War 1. And it will definitely scratch that particular itch. But at the same time, it stands out on its own, something the series continues to expand in other ways. At the time of its release, Darksiders was a critical and commercial success, selling over 1 million copies worldwide, and receiving a solid 8 out of 10 from most critics. Even before the release of the first game, publisher and IP holder THQ announced that Darksiders would be a franchise, with Visual Games already starting working on a sequel. A very ambitious sequel suiting its Pale Rider. But that's a story for another day. Until then, I highly recommend all of you to play Darksiders, because this is genuinely an amazing game, and it's sad to see how underrated it still is, despite people loving God of War. I guess not everything is a win. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll meet you guys next time. See ya!